Going in light, coming out heavy.
So, what makes a good hunter a good hunter?
And being a guide in Alaska, it's all decision making. Decision making that can result in life or death.
Here we go.
It's go time. Great place to hunt, find the water, find where they're bedding, find their habits from season to season based on weather pattern. That actually has no factor. Got a few bonus points stored up. Great unit to get out there. You really want to focus on any kind of elevation. Okay, we're jumping right into Unit 5, guys. 5A, 5B North, and 5B South. We're going to talk about draw odds, hunt strategy, and also the best places to hunt and get you started. We're going to look at 5A is that eastern side, that eastern portion of Unit 5, and it borders the Mogollon Rim. Now, the Mogollon Rim is an important landmark. It's an important geographical location for the movement of elk. You know, I read a lot of stuff about 5A recently, and they term the elk herd in 5A as being like migratory. And although I agree with that in part, it's not like the migratory that you think of when you think of Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, like those late season bulls that literally change zip codes, that walk hundreds of miles to get out of the snow. So when you're talking migratory for Arizona standards, you're talking about like 20 miles, maybe 5 miles. Literally, like it's a matter of going down off the Mogollon Rim and coming back up for the rut, which is, yeah, I guess that is migratory. But keep that in mind, guys, especially if you don't really understand the way things move and the way things work in Arizona. We don't really have a migration, so to speak. These elk do move around season to season based on weather patterns and hunting pressure and everything in between, breeding periods, calving periods, which is very, very normal. They're not just going to stay in one spot. But to term migratory, that's kind of a stretch. So tread lightly when you think about that in terms of migration herds. However, the Mogollon Rim, because it is such a big landmark, a geographical barrier for a lot of elk, because it's essentially a cliff or a rim that lines central Arizona. So many, many units, elk units specifically, touch and border the Mogollon Rim. And the Mogollon Rim is the unit border for a dozen units in Arizona. So it is kind of that dividing line. So a lot of times elk will go from unit to unit, and it's only a matter of just a couple feet, just depending on if they want to come off the rim or stay up high. So most of the elk in Unit 5A are located in that higher elevation type stuff. So up along the Mogollon Rim. You're looking at 8,000 feet typically. As you go north in 5A, it kind of becomes more flats and junipers, and there's definitely some elk there, and there's resident elk herds there, but the population density is a lot lower as you go in the northern 5A region. And it's kind of tough to hunt, guys, to be honest. I mean, when you are hunting junipers and kind of that lower flatlands, you just try to get up on any elevation point you can see, and you try to glass them up, and then hopefully you have help so you guys can get in there and navigate into these bulls effectively, because they can just disappear in the clumps of junipers and never come out. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there watching them, and then they appear, a mile away somewhere else. 5A, if you draw a 5A tag, guys, that's phenomenal. The early archery elk hunting is great. We'll talk about the draw odds for all these later on, but it's a great, great hunt, because what you have, those meadows, timber, little canyons, lots of water, heavy ponderosa pine forests. When I say timber, all along the Mogollon Rim, these elk just love that, especially for the rut, because there's a lot of cover, there's a lot of water, and there's a lot of feed. And as an archery hunter, you can really move in 5A really well. You can move and you can drive and you can pretty much go everywhere you want to in 5A. That seems like a disadvantage in some cases where you're like, I need to get away from people. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. If you're a hunter that spends most of his or her time in like wilderness areas in Montana or Wyoming, this may not be the hunt for you. But if you have that mindset of, hey, I just want to hunt screaming bulls, I want to hunt Early Archery, Arizona, I've got 12 points as a resident, and let's say you've got 15 to 18 points as a non-resident. Something to consider, guys, because there are good bulls in 5A. It's not typically like your trophy unit, like it's not a unit 9, unit 10, unit 27, unit 1, unit 23, but it is that second tier level where you could shoot a really good bull, and more importantly than just the size of the bull, you can have a very, very good early archery elk hunt in 5A. There's a good population, there's good habitat, and like I was saying before, it's really good to move and it's easy to operate as an archery hunter, meaning you can walk a long ways. You're not going down these giant canyons. There are some pretty steep country in 5A, which is great, and I suggest that you focus on some of that country to look for elk, but it's not the crazy elevation changes that you can get into in unit 23 or 27, for example. And that goes from the southern half to the northern half of 5A as well. So it's just a really good hunt overall. Like I said before, the trophy quality, the trophy potential may not be sky high, may not be 400 inches, but you're still looking at shooting and potential to shoot a 350 bull in a good growth year, in a good year where we have a lot of precipitation and the feed has the right amount of growth and the right amount of timing for when these elk grow their antlers. So 5A also has a late archery elk hunt, which is a really good opportunity. We've actually been very, very successful in that hunt specifically. It's not a rut hunt. It can be a very, very difficult hunt, but the bulls are there and they're really fun to spot and stalk and sit water, just depending on how dry it is. But just a really, really good unit to access and kind of get in there and mix it up with Arizona elk. So let's move to 5B North and 5B South. Now, 5B is a little bit up off the rim, borders 6A, and then it's the 5B North is up by Flagstaff. Both of these units, not much different than 5A other than the fact that they're not sitting on that geographical landmark, which is the Mogollon Rim. They're just up, but they border big canyons that are in 6A just to the west, and they have very, very similar habitat and very similar country. So essentially what 5B is, it's divided into where it becomes junipers and kind of rolling hills and flats, where 5A, it's just the northern half of 5A, where they actually divided 5B into two different subunits. So 5B South is more your heavy timber, ponderosa pines, looks a lot like 5A, and then you get into some of that juniper stuff too in 5B South as well. Bull quality, still, it's not your highest end bull quality. You can still shoot a 330, 340 bull out of 5B South. You're not looking to shoot a raghorn or first day, especially with an early archery elk hunt. The advantages that you have of it not being a top tier trophy elk unit is it takes less points to draw, which we'll look at very specifically towards the end of this video. So you're looking at a great opportunity to hunt elk in a very healthy elk population. 5B North is not entirely different. You still have a lot of that timber. You still have a bigger portion of kind of rolling junipers, not as many canyons and steep, nasty country in 5B North as there is in 5B South, but still you can get into some of that stuff that's rugged and remote, which comes into play for late rifle. So your strategy hunting 5B and 5A, typically in the early archery elk season, is you want to find the water. You also want to find the pockets of timber and meadows, is these elk will use those meadows to kind of rut and breed and call and do those things, but they're also going to pull back and bed up in the timber. So big strategy that I have when I'm early archery elk hunting in unit 5, especially in the southern half, 5A and 5B South, is you not only locate some good water sources, sometimes there can be too many drinkers, especially in 5A. There's too much water to kind of isolate. So you want to try to find the most isolated water in those areas. But also what I like to do is try to locate their bedding areas. So if I'm going in there scouting, their bedding areas and the bedding areas that those cows use in late summer leading up to September, they're going to use during that archery elk season in September. Obviously, they'll get pushed around and they'll change habits, but it's really important to understand where they're moving and what meadows, what openings, what timber they're using to bed, and then also what they're using and how they're accessing different water sources. Early archery elk stuff, just something to point out, just kind of how I like to do it. Bedding areas are extremely important for me when I'm hunting thick timber stuff and the elk aren't really calling, they're not really responding back. Maybe they're going really nocturnal, maybe it's a full moon, super hot, and you're not getting the responses that you like calling. The next phase, if it was me or a client, is we access that bedding area in timber and we get the wind, we stay downwind and we slowly creep into where they're bedding and then just sit and wait for the opportunity when the big bull gets up or he chases a satellite bull towards you, gets you within bow range. That's a really good strategy to kind of have in your back pocket if other conditions are not working in your favor. So let's talk late rifle. So we've talked a little bit about early archery. Late archery is awesome as well. Awesome in the fact that you can draw it pretty easily and you still get good opportunities on good elk. Late rifle is different. So late rifle, what helps you in early archery kind of hurts you in late rifle, and that's access. It's really tough for some of these bulls to get out and get tucked in because there's not a ton of deep canyons in remote country, and there's nowhere you can't go in a quad or a side-by-side or a truck in any of these units. So it's very accessible and there's not a lot of deep, nasty, rugged country for late rifle bulls to kind of hold out and be holdovers. So what happens is some of the bigger bulls, they'll get tied up around the Mogollon Rim if you're hunting 5A, and they'll kind of use that and they'll kind of get in a country which is really, really hard to access on either 5A side or 22 North side. And then if you're hunting the 5B North and 5B South, you really want to focus on any kind of elevation change, any kind of steep canyons if you're hunting that southern half. And then as you go up into 5B North, some of that more remote stuff, again, any kind of topography where these elk can bed up. And look, guys, they got to have food, they got to have water, and they got to have cover. So you want to find a spot and focus on areas where you have all three. And when you're dealing with bulls, when you're hunting bulls, you really want to focus on the worst country each unit has. So that's kind of why 5B North and 5B South doesn't exactly have like the trophy reputation. And even 5A is just because there is so much access. And there's country very close to Unit 5 on each side that some of these bulls will come into and rut these cows and then regress back into some of these really nasty canyons in 6A and in 22 and in some of those other areas that are really, really hard to get to in other units completely. So that's kind of why Unit 5 is a little bit easier to draw and has the reputation that it does of not being a giant trophy area. And if you look at it and you read online, you'll probably hear some things, read some things about hunting pressure. Just be prepared for hunting pressure, guys. Be prepared for doing your homework, getting in there and scouting, having a strategy. I really emphasize early archery. Late rifle guys, you really have to do the same thing. Find the water, find where they're bedding, find their habits. You'll understand more about the unit if you get in there directly before your actual hunt starts. So if you have a late rifle hunt and you're like, let me go in there in September and let's see what the bulls are doing, let's see what the rut's like, that actually has no factor in your late rifle hunt. Yeah, you'll see kind of some bulls, and maybe some bulls are going to stick around the area and you'll kind of see what's there. You'll learn a little bit of terrain, you'll see some water, but those water sources may change. There's oftentimes those water sources will dry up, elk will start using different areas. The time before your actual hunt is the most important, and that goes for early archery, late archery, and late rifle. Late rifle, the bulls are in totally different areas than they are during early archery. You got to get in there that week before your hunt starts, really start dialing in, really start taking inventory of where the bulls are at, what bulls are there, how big are they, what am I going to try to target, and the approach that is necessary to get them on the ground. All right, let's talk draw odds. Bonus points, draw odds, and just what to expect from the draw this year. Unit 5 is very, very good for that second tier type hunt where you're pretty close to everything. You're not too far from Flagstaff. You're not that far from Phoenix. So it's a good unit, especially to cut your teeth on if you've got a few bonus points stored up. It's a great unit to get out there and have a high quality hunt. I hope the draw odds helped you guys kind of develop a hunt strategy, and I hope some of those areas that I was pointing out on the maps helps you, kind of gets you educated and gets you ready to find not holding 20 bonus points. As a resident, you need in the 10 ballpark, 10 to 12 bonus points to really plan a hunt and get drawn. As a non-resident, you're looking at that 10 to 17, just depends if you're early archery or your late rifle. So it's a good mid-tier type hunt, guys, where look, you're going to be hunting really good elk habitat. You can do a lot of scouting by yourself. You can do a lot of scouting on a vehicle. So there's advantages of having it be very accessible. You don't need a ton of bonus points to draw it. You have the ability to draw and hunt 300 to 330 class bulls, maybe bigger, 340, 350. That's a top tier bull in a lot of different states. So if we're looking at 5A and 5B overall, it's a great place to hunt, great and healthy elk population. The trophy potential is not 400 inches, but that still can happen. And what you're really still hunting for is just a high quality bull. 300 plus inch bull, 330, 340, 350 is not out of the question. All these things are starting points, guys. You got to do your scouting and get serious, especially if you draw tag. All right, guys, I hope that helps. Talk to you later.